All right, I think we're just about at the top of the hour. I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Kineo office hours session today on competencies. My name is Alex Carrick. I am one of the platforms consultants here at Kineo, really overseeing Totra and its implementation and support, along with any training needs that clients may have. So for those of you who know me, great to see you again. For those who don't, it's nice to meet you. And today we are going to talk about competencies in our office hours session. For those of you who have not attended an office hours session before, we'll do a quick presentation, and by we I mean either Taylor or myself. We'll do a quick presentation on a topic either we get questions on, or something in a new version, or just something we find that's kind of cool. And today that is competencies. And then afterwards, we will open it up for questions if there are any. So the first question is our agenda. What are competencies? So we're going to cover that a little bit. I know the word kind of gets thrown around a lot, but we'll make sure that we have a good working definition. And then how are they used in Totra Learn? Everything from how you set them up, how they're configured, and then what, as an administrator, do they do for you? So at a basic level, and I pulled these right from the Totra Help documentation, that competencies are the skills, knowledge, and behaviors that you require your staff to possess and that you may measure staff performance against. The competency hierarchy area shows you to set up one or multiple competency structures or frameworks containing any number of individual competencies. So that's really some fancy language, but essentially they are outside objectives. Is a person competent in a certain skill in a certain area based on what they are doing within the LMS? So some benefits of why you would set up competencies within Totra, and I alluded to the first one, is being able to link courses to competencies, and then being able to link those competencies to either a position or organizational hierarchy or both, so that while it takes a little bit more work on the front end to get this configured, it does create a lot of automation opportunities to be able to assign out and report on what competencies your learners are attaining. For those of you who use learning plans, it's a great way to be able to pull in learning objectives and courses directly into a learning plan based on their job, as well as allowing for managers and staff to track that training. And I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. So at first, we need to go into a Totara 12 page. So we'll go to a stock playground site that we play on. So to get to the competency area, we're going to click our site administration cog, and competencies are going to be here in the first column off to the left under core platform. If you are not on version 12 yet, this competency area is going to be found in site administration, hierarchies, and then competencies. So once we get taken to our competency page, you'll notice a few different aspects. The first is, and the most important, is the competency framework. So this is going to be the container that holds all of your competencies. Anyone that uses organization or positional hierarchies, it's the same concept. And it does allow you to have multiple frameworks. I don't have a great use case off the top of my head on how you might use multiple frameworks for competencies, but you're able to. So to give you an idea, I use some SpongeBob references. So I created our Krusty Krab competency structure, and being able to see things like customer service, scheduling, first aid, recipes, safety, making change. You'll see that I originally had these under in a hierarchy of individual job types. On second thought, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to do it, as you can reuse competencies for multiple positions, and that doesn't necessarily allow you to do that. So depending on your exact use case, that may change on how you set these up or have them tagged. And within a competency, the idea is that the system / managers are going to determine whether a user is or is not competent. So in order to do that, we need to create some scales. Well, ideally you only need one scale, but you can have multiple scales. And each scale can only be used in one framework. So maybe that's a reason why you would use multiple frameworks. So I created some examples here. A competent, not competent scale, a competency scale, and a 1 to 5 scale. I'll show you the 1 to 5 scale looks pretty basic. What is the default value? And then you're able to set which of those values does the system consider proficient. So really simple, think of it, 1 through 5, you could go competent, not competent, you could go check plus, check minus, or if there's something in place that you're already using as an HR function at your business or organization, that would be what you would create there. So once we get our competency scales, we can go into our framework. If I wanted to add a new competency, I would come up here and click Add New Competency. I would create the parent. So this would be in our hierarchy structure. Let's say I want to create something new. Given our normal hierarchy, we'll say cashier. Our cashier needs to learn robbery skills, probably isn't how I want to phrase this. Let's call this anti-robbery skills. Yeah, skills is fine. And you'll see you are able to add a description, a competency ID number. You'll see down here that there is a type. So you are able to create different types of competencies that may exist in your hierarchy. All the type is going to do, and you'll see that I made my Krusty Krab employee type, is the type is a set of custom fields that you can put on your competencies. So if you're familiar with user profile custom fields, with course custom fields, with seminar custom fields, it's the same idea, and basically being able to add some metadata into your competency hierarchy. And where this can become useful is when it comes to reporting. So we'd be able to filter reports, we'd be able to pull reports, and we'd be able to track that information. Then you'll see that we have our aggregation method. So this is basically asking, the system asking how you want it to calculate whether or not someone is competent. So your three options are all, any, or off. And if it's all, a user has to achieve all child competencies to complete the parent. Any would be if there's a group of, say, 4 competencies below a parent, they only need to complete 1. Or if you don't want the system to make that calculation or that decision at all, just turn it off. Then they can still be marked manually. So for this, I'll stick with all. You'll see that my scale here is dictated by my competency framework, so I won't need to add anything extra to that. And then I click Save Changes, and I should be taken to my Krusty Krab anti-robbery skills competency. Related competencies it's more informational purposes. If you wanted to relate competencies to other competencies, you can. It doesn't serve any greater purpose in the system. It's not pulling anywhere. It's not creating any efficiencies throughout the system. It's more for clerical purposes. But where we get into the real meat and potatoes of competencies is when it comes to linked courses. So if we have our anti-robbery skills, I'll be honest, I did not go ahead and make an anti-robbery course or set of courses for this. So I'm going to set just some of our basic courses that we have in here. I'll go ahead and put 3 is a nice, easy number. And you'll see here that my 3 courses that I've chosen for this competency are selected here. You'll then see that we have a drop down for mandatory or optional. This is going to come into play if you are using competencies when it comes to learning plans, and it should be pretty self-explanatory, but mandatory with a course within a competency means you have to take that course in order for it to be competent. And so if someone was assigned to this competency, they would have to take it. Optional is the course would be recommended. There is no save button. That kind of threw me off the first time. But to get back, you'll see that we can go to return to our competency framework. You'll see that we're back here. Our anti-robbery skills with our 3 courses are listed here. And you would build out your full hierarchy. So I've worked with some clients in the past, and I know I've talked to some others when it comes to getting this imported, or maybe making this easier if you've got hundreds of competencies that your organization uses or subscribes to. Doing each of these by hand is going to be a little tedious. So what's nice to know is that all of these items in the framework, you're able to export them, but you're also able to import them through the HR import process. So that's a new source that you can use in HR import. If you're interested in more of that, I would check out the HR import office hours video. But to let you know that we can automate this process, so it doesn't need to be as manual and daunting as you may think it does. So as we move forward, if you don't want to go the full HR import route, you are able to use the bulk actions function. And again, a lot of this functionality is borrowed or similar to the position and organizational hierarchy. But if you wanted to bulk add, delete, move, or reclassify items, you can do so quickly through this menu, so you don't have to do it quite as easily or quite as difficultly. And so once you get your whole competency hierarchy set up, it's probably worth it to know, like, what does this actually do? So the 2, well, let's call it 3 main areas that I think competencies really come into play and can be used across your Totara site. And the first is in learning plans. So I have another window open here. It's logged in as Mr. Krabs. I am in a learning plan that I've created. You'll see here that I have competencies that have been added to my learning plan. Conflict resolution, customer service, first aid scheduling. Maybe we want to make sure as Mr. Krabs, and of course that's not going to show, that we want to add the anti-robbery skills to our learning plan. I can hit continue here, and you'll see that I have my optional courses here. I can select which linked courses I want to add to my learning plan. So if I click save, I've got my 3 robbery courses. If I move over to my learning plan here, the courses in my learning plan, I'll see that I have my quick complete courses here, 2, 3, and 4. The way this learning plan is set up, the user needs to send approval, so that's why these are not showing up, or well, they're showing up in draft mode as opposed to approved. The next place where competencies can be used is within a program. So if I am an admin setting up a program, I have my test comp program that I've created. I'm now back in as an administrator. If you've used programs, you are used to probably setting up your course sets in a program. If you click the drop down here, you can actually use competencies as your program course sets. So if I click competency and add, instead of having to go through and find all the courses and maybe forget some or add some that are incorrect, I could go straight to my anti-robbery skills and click OK. And it's going to pull in the anti-robbery skills competency, and it's going to pull in the courses that are associated with it. And that's all well and good. But what I actually learned when I was doing the research for this office hours session is that you can continue to add competencies so that as you go through, if someone, say, gets promoted to a new position and you have a dynamic audience set up that pulls them into that new position, you'd be able to assign out all of the competencies that they need for that new position with how many days, and you could build your training program based on programs and competencies linked to different positions or to different parts of your organization. And you'll notice, again, those that have played with competencies, or excuse me, played with programs before, I still have my operators here, then, or, and. So if I just want them to do both, I can call that and call it good and save my changes. And now this is a program that can be assigned out to users. So we covered learning plans, we covered programs. If you're like me, I want to know how all this data is used and how we can use this data to improve our everyday operations or make something more efficient. And so what happens with competencies is we are actually able to create reports using competencies as a lens that we look through. So what I mean by that is in our reports tab, I've created a competency report. And you'll notice that this is not the default report. I've done a little bit of work to this, but at a basic level, you can see, and I have this based on people. We could have this based on competency if we wanted to, that we can pull in a user, a competency, what their position is, and we can see if they're proficient or not. And we can see what date their proficiency was achieved. And I didn't touch on this, but my competency types that I mentioned where you can create competency custom fields, I created one that was just called difficulty. And you'll see that I'm able to pull in those custom fields into this report as well. So if you think out in what some potential uses for this are, you could create a report, and using content and access, you might want to show a manager the competencies of their direct and indirect reports, because that's something that they can keep track on and help work on. If you wanted to see maybe who is ready or who has the competencies attached to a manager position, you'd be able to rank and grade and make decisions based on possible promotions based on competencies. Or if at a higher level you wanted to do more of a skills matrix or kind of a higher level gap analysis of, hey, we need this competency in our organization and we don't have anyone that can do it. Can we train someone in our organization that's already there to do it, and how do we do it? Or if that's a gap, do we need to bring someone in to fill that gap? So that is competencies in a nutshell. Well, let's call it a 20-minute nutshell. This is going to be the first of a few office hours sessions that are focused on performance management. So we'll get a little bit more into how competencies tie into learning plans and some other facets that you might use in your organization in coming sessions. But really just wanted to use this as a good introduction to competencies and why you might use them. All right, well, seeing as there's no questions, I want to thank you for being a part of today's office hours session on competencies. I hope you learned a little bit. If you have any additional questions on competencies, feel free to reach out to any of us here at Kineo who can help answer those questions. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you at a future session.